always make sure your first lien position, make sure there's no liens that supersede you. You want to be the last one in, but the first one out. And I think the best way to do that is always ensuring that you have that first lien recorded on the property.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you're enjoying this show, do me a quick little favor and leave us that rating and review. That helps more people find this show, but also allows us to make sure we're delivering the content that you need to be a successful investor. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Ruben Izgelov. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today. Ruben Izgelov has over a decade in the real estate industry, acquiring, flipping, developing, and financing over $500 million worth of real estate. Now, Ruben has quickly become a renowned real estate expert, speaker, and guide for many professionals in the industry. Now, his most successful time in his career was during the 2009 financial crisis. During this time, he bought, fixed, and sold distressed properties, which showed his determination in both bullish and bearish markets. Let's welcome to the show, Ruben Izgelov.
John, thank you so much for having me. Had to pinch myself to confirm that that's who you're speaking about, me and no one else. So
there you go. I love it. I love it. Well, Ruben, I didn't mention this, but you are the co-founder and managing partner of We Lend. But why don't you
correct.
take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps on your bio?
I'll go back to as far as us immigrating to the U.S. in the 90s. My father came here with about $750 to $1,000 to his name, 6 mouths to feed. Single bedroom, one bathroom apartment, sometimes up to 12 people, just really, really hard work. And labor, you can say, kind of fast forward at 13, 14 years old, one of my cousins was buying distressed real estate here in Queens, New York, and asked that I kind of visit with him going door knocking, only because he felt like a 13-year-old will have a much better open ratio than, say, a 35 or 40-year-old at the time. And he was right, door knocking in kind of distressed areas for a 13-year-old. People are curious why they're knocking, and a lot more doors were opening just to try to help out the 13-year-old. Meanwhile, my 30-year-old, 35-year-old cousin would just kind of swoop in and try to see if he can negotiate a deal with them. And that kind of gave me the exposure to real estate. I saw exactly what he was doing, the money that was made, obviously a lot of hard work and late nights, but it gave me that taste of real estate where I said, okay, you know what, this is where I want to be once I grow up. Fast forward a little bit, my brother was buying real estate out in Florida, developing real estate. He was around 18 years old. I started originating loans as a loan officer at a mortgage brokerage. This was years ago. This was right before kind of like the mortgage and the recession that came about. And I ultimately also dropped out of high school because I just felt like, at that time I was making a ton of money. I didn't need an education. Boy, was I wrong on that front. I ultimately did go back to school. Got my GED, went to St. John's, got my undergrad, went to law school, graduated top of my class, and realized that education it may not be for everyone, but it was definitely for me. While I was in school, I was still buying, selling, flipping, developing real estate here in New York, predominantly in the Brooklyn and Queens area. And a little after law school, I wanted to find a cheaper source of liquidity and financing for the deals that we were buying, because at that time we were using a hard money lender, but the hard money lender was charging us an arm and a leg. I mean, we were paying sometimes 14, 15% interest rates with, sometimes 4 to 5 points. So you could imagine how that kind of cut into our profit margins. So we said, okay, you know what, we need to find a cheaper source of liquidity. So we went to like a private lender conference, and I was listening to an attorney, an SEC attorney speak, kind of describing the entire debt market and the business behind it, let alone just the financing behind it, but actually the business behind the operations and the profits and the earnings that you can generate. And we did some quicker, back the napkin type of math with my cousin, and we realized that we could be hitting mid-teen returns doing the same thing that we're doing today, just being in a much safer part of the capital stack. Because naturally, when you make a loan on a property versus an equity deal on a property, you're first, well, last win, but excuse me, last in but first one out. So you're just in a much safer part of the capital stack. So for us, that was a huge attraction. Never looked back since. To date, we funded about $500 million in loans. Seen over about 4,000 loan applications, funded about 1,000. So kind of rocking and rolling. And like I said, never looked back since, and just looking for forward to the trajectory of where Wheelan is going to be in the next couple of years.
I love it. And how long has Wheelan been in business now?
So we founded the company in 2018. We made our first loan, I want to say in April of 2018. It was a $400,000 loan to a dear friend of ours, actually, who's also our competitor in the space. You know, we were bidding on properties together. Picked up my phone and said, "Look, I'm no longer buying real estate. I'm lending on real estate. So trust me, I can execute." And he did. And like I said, I mean, it's been nothing but a high kind of growing road since then.
I love it, man. Listen, just to recap that, man, you talked about immigrating to this country. You know, your father didn't have much money, you know, 6, 7 of you living in one place, sometimes up to 12 people in that place
Yeah,
at a
yeah.
time. You guys were out there hustling, right? That immigrant story and out there doing everything you can. You mentioned your cousin door knocking on doors, bring you in as a young teen, knowing that your young face might get some more doors open than his face would do. Reminds me of a quick story. When I was a kid, my stepmother did the same thing with me. We went to beauty salons selling these little latex gloves, and I was
Love
the
it.
cute, 11, 12-year-old kid that the stylist would buy from while she sat in the car. So, but that experience is great, right? It gets you out your comfort zone. It pushes you to be somebody that maybe you don't feel comfortable with, but you also get to learn a little bit about business from a hands-on standpoint. You took that experience and started getting into distressed assets. I love your story about dropping out of school, realizing education actually was important, ultimately going out there, not just going to graduating, getting your GD, but going to college, getting your law, your graduate from law
Law degree,
school,
yeah. Yeah,
and being able to focus on that aspect of it. Let's get back to kind of the Wheelan portion of the business. And
sure.
you kind of had this epiphany where you realize that, hey, you know what, we don't have to take on all the risks from an execution standpoint, finding the distressed asset, getting that thing under contract, getting our contractors renovating this property, and then being able to exit. We can just focus on the capital stack and lending money and make similar returns as we were doing everything. Talk to me a little bit more about kind of that realization and how, you seem like a pretty normal everyday guy. It's
Yeah.
not like you had this big institutional capital backing you up. So how can everyday investors like you and I get into the lending side of real estate investing?
Totally. I mean, look, we started with very little liquidity. We did have some personal money, family money, but we also made a lot of strategical partnerships with some private debt funds that were able
And
to
you,
fund loans
sorry, I just want
alongside
to be
us.
clear. When you
Yeah.
say a little bit of money, give us like some context, right? Because a little bit could be 10 million, a little bit could be 100,000. So
So
just give me a little
yeah, no,
context
it
there.
wasn't. It was definitely upwards of $1 million. It was somewhere around, I would say, about $2.5 million that we had the ability to play with, but having also the ability to use the private debt funds as strategical partners that would fund loans alongside us for some period of time definitely gave us the ability to fund more loans than we had the ability to fund on our own. So having those strategical partnerships, I think, are crucial. So if a private investor who's probably listening to this right now is saying, you know what, we're probably experiencing the same things. We're having a hard time finding the good deals. It's a lot of hard work having to, go out there and find the deals and make sure that they're executed, and property management and the contractors. I mean, we all have our horror stories with the contractors, right? So if you're listening to this, I mean, I would say that yeah, it is doable, it is manageable, but it also is hard work in and of itself, because you're deploying money to a borrower that sometimes you've never met. You've spoken to them, you verify their experience, you check their credit, you look at their background search, but you also want to make sure that you're making good loans to good borrowers, because at the end of the day, in the event that the property goes south, you want to have to take back a property that you're ready to hold on to. So it does come with its own pitfalls, but having to know how to underwrite a loan is absolutely crucial.
Talk to us about that aspect of the business. You mentioned good
Yeah.
loans to good borrowers. When we say good, I think that's always relative. So how do you define a good loan and a good borrower?
Yeah. So look, I mean, today, 63% of our borrowers are actually returning borrowers, borrowers that we've done loans with in the past. For us, that's essential. That is critical because we know their track record. I mean, we already have their track record. We have paid off loans with them. We know what their payment history is, and so on. So returning borrowers is essential. But if you're just starting out, you're not going to have any returning borrowers because you had no past business. So one of the things that we look at, and that's a key metric for us, is the borrower's experience and the asset that they're buying. So for us, we always said, okay, you know what? The asset class has to be something that we're comfortable holding, and we're comfortable to say that it's going to stay resilient. So we always stayed on the residential side, right? So most of what we're financing today is 1 to 4 units, multifamily, and mixed use. We shy away from the retail. We shy away from the office space. We don't want to get into something that, again, just too much market volatility. And the reason why we stay with residential is because we feel like, obviously, and we kind of could say this out loud, everyone always needs a roof over their head, and there is a huge deficit in residential spaces today. So for us, residential is key. So choosing your asset class is important. And then the other key metric that we always like to make sure that we're following on is the borrower's experience and rate of execution, right? So 89% of our borrowers today are experienced operators that have done deals similar to what we're financing for them today in the past. So even if they're not returning borrowers, we look at their past history, we tie them to the deals that they've done, and we want to make sure that they have the ability to execute. Outside of their experience, we look at their net worth, right? We want to make sure that they have the liquidity and the funds to be able to finish the project. Because look, we're not financing 100% of the deal. We're financing on an average about 82% of their acquisition, which means that they have to come in with about 20% of the purchase price, along with the construction. They have to start with that. And in addition to that, they have closing costs. So we want to make sure that they have the liquidity and the net worth. So today, 89% of our borrowers are experienced institutional grade borrowers, high net worth that we know are able to execute. But outside of just from a perspective of safety for ourselves when we're making a loan, we want to make sure that they're institutional grade and high net worth, because tomorrow, if they decide not to sell the property, because most of our borrowers, they're buying properties with an exit strategy of selling, if they do not want to sell the property and they want to hold on to the property, they are going to be qualified for a takeout loan. So looking at it from those type of perspectives of ensuring our safety and our position, but also ensuring the borrower's rate of execution, making sure that they have the ability to take out a loan in the future is essential.
Ruben, I like what you said
I
there, and
hope
there
that
are a couple
answered that
things I want
question.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did. And just to recap it, what you talked about was first of all the asset class, right? Looking at residential, meaning places where people are going to live, whether that's a 1 to 4 unit, whether it's commercial, multifamily, right? Mixed use, but you're looking at places where people are going to live, not really doing self storage, not really doing office or retail, focusing on where people are looking to rent. And part of the rationale there is that you feel more comfortable taking over an asset like that as opposed to being able to take over an office building. You mentioned that when you're looking for a good borrower, you're looking for someone who has experience and their rate of execution. So you want to make sure that they have the ability and they can demonstrate a track record of executing exactly what it is they're trying to do. You look at their net worth to make sure that they have the liquidity and the funds to finish the project, that they can fund the renovations and do different things like that. But then also that, if they go to refinance, and kind of pull out the loan or switch it up, then they have the means to be able to do that. You mentioned that you look for institutional grade. Can you explain exactly what that is?
Yeah, so these are borrowers with good credit. I would say the average FICO score for us today is right around 693. They have a good background and a history of completing projects similar to what we're financing for them today, and they have sufficient amount of liquidity. Sufficient amount of liquidity generally is about 10% of our loan size. So the reason why we look at all that is obviously we want to make sure that we're making loans to a good borrower, but also, like I mentioned before, when they go out to a takeout loan with a community bank or a bank local to them, those are the key metrics that the bank is looking at, right? So we stress test that for a borrower ahead of time to make sure that they have the ability to take out the loan in the event that they choose not to sell it. In today's market, a lot of our guys are actually choosing not to sell and hold on to the property, but also from a perspective of sense of security for us. So we stress test it from that perspective, but we also stress test it to make sure that in the event that they can't sell it or they can't get a takeout loan for some period of time because there's some volatility that's in the market at that given time, that their rental income can or will support our mortgage payments or the mortgage payments of the future lender, right? And the debt service coverage ratios are met based on the market at that time and at that time that they're actually refinancing.
I think there's some good takeaways, whether you want to be a private lender or even just an LP investor in a deal. So, first of all, what you mentioned is you're doing a lot of this work here up front to make sure that when they go for that takeout loan, that they qualify based on that bank or that lender's criteria. And that's really important because, a lot of times people may go in and implement their business plan. Maybe the market shifts a little bit. Maybe the cash flow isn't exactly what they thought. And guess what? They thought they were going to qualify for a certain type of loan, and then they don't, and now they ran out of options and they're trying to figure out what to do next and they're scrambling. So you're making sure that you understand where they're at and that they qualify based on the business plan and based on their own financial position out of the gate. As an LP investor, even if you're not lending privately, you should understand that when investors are going out there and doing value add multifamily deals or deals like this, a lot of times the banks are requiring the same exact thing. They want to make sure we've got the net worth and liquidity on these deals. They want to make sure that the DSCR requirements are there. They're taking a look at the experience. So they're doing a lot of that heavy lifting to ensure that that borrower, meets their criteria. But as an LP investor, you should ask these questions or understand that as well. You want to understand, where they're at, how the deal is going to come together. And this is a great way to kind of vet deals, vet opportunities, and understand the way they're looking at not just their primary business plan, but their backup. You want to have, a plan B and a plan C just in case the market changes or something changes where you're not able to implement, that first plan. So these are really good tips and tools of ways to think about vetting borrowers or vetting anybody you're going to park your capital with. Talk to us about some of the downfalls, right? You mentioned that, you want to make sure that it's a property that you're willing to take over in case that borrower, you didn't say the word, but the word is default, right? If they can't pay their mortgage or something happens where
Yeah,
you got to take that
yeah,
property back, you want to make sure
yeah.
one, it's an asset that you're happy to take back. But what are some of the challenges that could happen where a borrower could default?
So look, I mean, what we've seen lately is a lot of borrowers kind of underestimate the time that it takes to finish the project and the cost behind it. And we're seeing a lot of that with borrowers that are a bit kind of green in their experience, right? So they assume that the project is going to, take them 6 months to complete. Meanwhile, it took them a lot longer, right? It
Yep.
could take them beyond 12 months. Or they might assume that the project construction is going to be no more than four or $500,000. Meanwhile, it took them, double that amount. So what I would caution many of our, listeners here today is just make sure that you are, I think, realistic, right, with your expectations in terms of construction and the time and the cost that will be involved with it. So I think that's one of the key metrics. The other thing is just a lack of liquidity, right? So we're looking and we're still buying some properties and specifically in Florida where we've been having our focus there, but it's more on the multifamily side. So we have some syndicators that are coming knocking on the door saying, hey, do you want to JV with us? And we're always open to that idea as well. So one of the deals that we're looking at right now is just two investors. They bought a 30-unit project in South Florida, and they thought that they'll be able to complete it in time. They thought that they will be able to complete it at a certain price point. And obviously things went south. And when things go south, they start kind of fighting with each other. So a lot of times what we see is partner disputes. So I think that, if you go into a partnership, you want to have all of that kind of spelled out as to what happens in an event like this, what happens in an event like that, who has the management right, who has the control right, and so on. So, but also most importantly, just make sure you're liquid enough to be able to take on the project in the event that something goes wrong, right? So these guys now they're selling the project at a minor loss, but it is a financial loss, but it's also a loss of time and loss of opportunity in other projects. So just make sure that you're realistic with your numbers. Make sure that if you do partner up or you're an LP in a fund or in syndication, that they know what they're doing. They have those partnership kind of conditions spelled out, but also that they have the liquidity and they don't just kind of over lever and depend on the leverage, but they have the liquidity to be able to take on the project without the financing in the event that something goes wrong.
No, I like that. For a lot of the deals you're doing, I'm assuming that these are value add deals, maybe some distressed, maybe some are value add, but there's some renovation component into it. And I imagine that many of these investors are banking on that takeout loan and maybe made some estimations on where they thought the lending environment would be once they completed that project. Obviously, that's changed and that is starting to impact a
Totally.
number of investors. How are you kind of managing that process with your current investors, particularly if they were expecting to get a loan with certain proceeds and the market just isn't matching up with that? Are you working with them and helping them, or what does that process look like when you're having these kind of tough discussions?
So thankfully, we don't have those issues on our balance sheet today. But I would definitely caution many of our borrowers to kind of avoid that from happening. And I think one of the things that we're doing on the WeLend side is kind of preparing for all the stress that's going to come in the market very soon. It's kind of there, right? The conditions are already kind of boiling into that position. So one of the things that we are doing is actually implementing a bailout program. So essentially, we're foreseeing that a lot of borrowers, they're going to be in some kind of default, whether it's a technical default when they're past that 12-month time frame on their bridge lender and they cannot get an extension from their lender for whatever reason, or it could be a payment default, or it could be some kind of covenant default or violation, right? So in that situation, their lender accelerates their loan, they put them in default. So what we'll do is we'll come in and we'll take out their existing lender, but we will do it only on the condition that our entire loan amount, it does not exceed 65% of the as is value. So one thing that we're doing here at Wheelan is kind of knowing and acknowledging the fact that there is going to be stress in the market if it's not here already, and we're starting to see it today, and just preparing loan programs to be able to help borrowers and investors and syndicators in the position of their default or some kind of downturn in their project.
I love that, man. I think that that's a savvy way of staying on top of the market, right? We keep hearing and reading about, the market changes and how people are going to be impacted. And it's one thing to read about it. It's another thing to be proactive and start to explore
Yeah.
what your options are. And I will tell you that, if you are in that situation, you want to seek out, people like Ruben to understand, hey, what kind of programs exist? What kind of options are on the table before it gets too late? So you can make adjustments or, implement your business plan now so that you are better positioned to either A, do a takeout loan, or B, cut your losses and just save as much capital as you can for you and your partners. If you want to learn more about that, you can check out the website. WeLendLLC.com is the website. I know you all have a debt fund that you have launched as well. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's a 506c Reg D registered with the SEC. We're always actively raising capital. Today, the target returns for our investors are anywhere between 10 to 14%. Our investors right now are kind of limited partners, high net worth individuals, accredited investors who are actually seeing returns of anywhere between 10 to 12%. And that's not really hard to do in today's rate environment. We have the ability to be able to hit those returns and not have to go crazy trying to hit them. So today, our investors are hitting anywhere between 10 to 12%. But the beauty about investing in a debt fund versus an equity deal is that you're just in a much safer part of the capital stack. I think I mentioned that earlier in the show. You're a much safer part of the capital stack in the sense that before anyone gets paid out on an equity deal, before any investor makes money on an equity deal, the lender's always repaid. Outside of that, investing into a debt fund, the other beauty about it is the fact that a debt fund is always liquid. In an equity deal, it usually takes about 3 to 5 years for you to see some kind of capital event. In a debt fund, you're seeing instant cash flow from, I would say, month one, right? So within 45 days of an investment, our investors are actually starting to see cash flows, and it's truly passive. It is truly consistent and predictable because you know exactly what rate we're charging, you know exactly what the loan size is, so you already know exactly what type of returns we're able to hit. So those are some of the benefits of what we're doing here at Wheeland and the fund.
I love it, man. You mentioned the capital stack and it being a little safer. And what I would suggest or what I would say there is that what you're getting at is just the order of the payout. So when you're investing as an equity investor, the very first thing you always have to pay, right, is your note, your mortgage. So you got to pay that first. After the mortgage, that's when If there's any pref equity or anything like that, that gets paid. And then finally, the equity, the partners, they get to take whatever profits are left over, right? So you're talking about investing in the debt or the mortgage component of these deals. So you're, getting paid before any profits are really accrued. So that's a great way for you to, mitigate some of the risk by moving up higher in the capital stack. Now, the downside, of course, is that you're not getting the equity upside in these deals. You're getting kind of whatever
Totally.
that monthly payment is, whatever that interest rate is that you're charging, any points that you're charging, you're not getting the equity upside. But that's the trade-off that you have. Can you talk to us about the liquidity aspect? Because I think that's why it's really interesting when you think about investing in a fund. For some folks, like, okay, hey, I put 50K, 100K into this fund. Some funds are more liquid than others. Talk to us about what that looks like for that LP investor. I mean, if I invest and want to get my money back 2 years from now to go do something else, is that possible? Or is it a time frame where I'm locked in for 5 years or so?
No, totally. So our lockup period is for a period of 12 months. It's not a 3 to 5 year lockup period. It is for a period of 12 months, which is a very short period of time, which is also amazing because it gives the investor in a debt fund less exposure to any market volatility. A lot can happen within a period of 2 years, let alone 3 or 5 years. So 12-month lockup period is something that a lot of our investors love. But also, I mean, look, if an investor for whatever reason comes to us earlier than 12 months and they need to be able to redeem their investment for whatever reason, they might have another investment somewhere else. If we have the ability to redeem the investor, we will do our best efforts to do it, right? And the reason why we normally do have the ability to redeem them earlier than 12 months is because the nature of our business is to be liquid, right? We have to have liquidity because our business is providing liquidity. So, our bank accounts have to be kind of flush with cash. Obviously, you don't want that money sitting at any given time, but the nature of our business is to be liquid because we have to be able to fund the future batch of loans and the next batch of loans. So in the event that an investor wants to be able to be redeemed sooner, we always make our best efforts to do it. Although, thank God, to date, we haven't had any redemption requests.
I love it, man. I love it. Well,
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing a little bit more on that. For people who are interested in getting started, maybe with, note investing or private lending, what's a good first step for them?
Learn how to underwrite a loan. I think that's the first thing, right? Is go through that process of looking at the property, right? Make sure you do an appraisal. Don't just go based on what you think. Try to get into the property to see the as is condition along with what the after repair value is going to be. Don't just look at what the borrower is buying the deal for, what they say the property is going to be worth after the renovation. Do your due diligence, but also look at the rental incomes in that area, right? If it's a single unit project, look at it from a perspective after the borrower is complete with the project and he occupies the property. Is it going to be the rental income? Is it going to be sufficient enough to be able to pay my mortgage payment along with the property taxes and insurance, right? Along with some other expenses, if there are any that you can think of. So you just want to make sure that the debt service is there to be able to carry your mortgage in the future, let alone the future mortgage in the event that they choose to refinance. So the one thing that I would just caution many new investors in the note kind of investing space is do your underwriting, make sure that you do a credit check, make sure you do a background check, verify their experience. Don't just go based on the addresses that they give you. So if they give you 123 Main Street, go on public records, confirm that they were in fact connected to 123 Main Street. And a lot of times you'll see that the properties were purchased under an entity, right? Look to see who signed the deed. Look to see who signed the mortgage documents, if there were any. And was it John Smith, your borrower, who's sitting right in front of you, right? And if it isn't, it was someone else, it's possible that it was the managing partner. But John Smith, your borrower, was still involved. So ask for an operating agreement to show that they were in fact involved in a deal. So due diligence, I think, is essential, especially in a market like this. Making debt investments is, like I said, much safer than equity investments. But if it's done wrong, it's just as risky, if not riskier.
And as far as the capital stack, are you doing first position notes, second position, a combination? Where do you fall there?
We don't do any second positions. I'm a strong believer in only first positions. And we have the borrowers personally guarantee every single loan. And that's super important because today our average loan size is right around 400,000 or 500,000, but the average borrower net worth is right around 2.6 million. which means that the borrowers have a lot more to lose than they have to gain. So they want to see the property get finished more than we want to see them finish because they just have a lot more to lose. So in that perspective, just again, due diligence is essential. And that's what I would stress to each and every single future new note investor.
I love that. I'm glad you gave that clarification. And as a quick little aside, I did a private loan some years ago, and I was in the basically like the third position. I didn't really understand
Oof.
all that. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I never saw that money again. So lesson learned, big time. And I think
Totally,
that's really important
totally.
for everything you said. Right? It's important to vet the borrower, make sure that you've got a good borrower who has the net worth, who has the liquidity, who has the capital to finish the project, who cares about their credit, right? They're vested in seeing the deal through because they've got personal guarantees on the line. And then also that, they have a good business plan and you're verifying all this information. So just really good tips to help anybody, again, whether you want to invest with We Lend, whether you want to do your own thing. I think those are good thoughts and good processes for you to make sure you protect your capital and make good investments. It doesn't guarantee success, but what it does is it allows you to mitigate that risk and puts you in a better position to be successful. And I think you mentioned you've had no defaults up to this point, correct?
So we don't have any defaults on our balance sheet today. We've had defaults, of course, in the past, but on our balance sheet as of today, we have no defaults, thank God.
There you go. And you said 4,000 applications?
So we've seen 4,000 loan applications. We funded about 1,000. So obviously,
Okay.
going back to
It's
that
about
due diligence,
25% or
just make
so.
sure, yeah, make sure that you're doing the right thing. Make sure that you are doing, crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's, because there's a lot of borrowers, especially the inexperienced ones that are kind of green, around the edges. They think that it's the best deal because their realtor said it is the best deal, right? And they don't do any due diligence or anything like that. So you want to make sure that you do the due diligence as a private lender, because not only are you kind of helping guarantee your own success, but you're helping guarantee the investor's success. And when we started in the space, I'll be very honest with you, we leaned heavily on our hard money lending when we were buying, selling, flipping, and developing. So even if we didn't need the financing, we would still get some type of financing just because we knew that the hard money lender, who was a lot more experienced than us, would actually do the due diligence alongside us, right? Because they want to make sure that their money is repaid. But outside of that, their attorney is doing some due diligence behind the scenes as well. So you just want to make sure that you know what you're doing and that the deals do make sense.
I love it, man. I love it. Great advice right there. Check out welendllc.com to learn more. Now we're going to go to a round of insights. All right, Ruben,
Uh-oh.
give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
Hmm. I gotta say, dropping out of high school, right? I thought that high school or education was not for me. I didn't need it. And I think that if at that time I wouldn't drop out of high school and I went straight to college, I probably wouldn't become an attorney. I wouldn't take it all the way. And I think that that type of experience that I had at that time of, thinking that I don't need it and I can do it without it. And, as Mike Tyson always says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I got punched in the face during the 2007, 2008 kind of crash, made me realize that I need to go to school. But just going to school and getting your bachelor's degree is, for me, wasn't enough. So I went and took it all the way. And I think that although I don't practice law today, I would do it all over again, because going to law school, taking the bar, kind of preparing for the bar and the whole nine, it shapes your brain to always see the downside before you see the upside, and preparing for the downside, even if there's nothing but upside, right? Because at the end of the day, managing other people's money, which is kind of what we're doing today on the fun side, you want to see the downside before you see the upside. And that's like one of the battles, constant battles that I have with my partners is, they're reviewing the deal or they're reviewing the investment. I talk about all the downsides while they're talking about all the upside, which is great, but you always need to see the downside before you see the upside, in my opinion. And I think that's what law school kind of prepared me for. So that's one of the failures, I would say, when I was a teenager, that prepared me for where I am today.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
LinkedIn. Oh man, LinkedIn is huge. Highly recommended. It's a treasure trove to learn so much. On my LinkedIn, and you can find me on LinkedIn. On my LinkedIn, I post about a number of different things. I connect with a number of different people. A lot of times we'll jump on a call with people that there's no like direct value to one another. We can't send business to one another, but we jump on a call, we get to know each other. They might share something that just will trigger something for me that will take my business to the next level. So I think LinkedIn is huge. On my LinkedIn, I also talk about the deals that we financed, what made me feel comfortable with the deal, what discomfort I had with the deal, and what risk mitigating tools I took to make me comfortable with that deal. So LinkedIn is a treasure trove. If you want to invest into real estate, I think that's really a place for you to go into.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Dale Carnegie, How to Make Friends and Influence People. I think that's the title of it. That book actually changed my life. When I was a teenager, I read that probably about 5 or 6 times. I actually just bought a shorter version because I felt like it's been so many years that I've read it. So the only book, and there are many other books, but the book that I would highly recommend is Dale Carnegie, How to Make Friends and Influence People. It could literally transform your life, as it did for me.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
My wife hates this, but I fall asleep working, I wake up working, right? So like the first thing I do is check my emails. The first thing I do is, go on my LinkedIn and see, who responded to my messages, my direct messages that I send out to people, and the posts that I make and engage with them. So I think just kind of falling asleep, and waking up working, I think is essential. But I think also the spiritual level, while I'm on, checking my emails while going to sleep, or while I'm, checking my LinkedIn or what have you, I also have, YouTube background kind of talking and listening to like spiritual lectures, right? So my father passed away a little over a year ago. Since then, I've become a little bit more spiritual than I ever did before. I felt like I always was spiritual, but I think now having that experience, that direct experience of losing someone that is so important to you in life, I think it brings you a lot closer to God than ever before. And I would say that, that spiritual journey is essential to many people. And it was essential to me.
Give me your number one insight for private lending.
Make sure your first lien positions. I think, John, with your experience with what
man, where were you? Where were you like 5, 6 years ago, man?
I was on LinkedIn. That's where I was.
I know.
No, but I would say always make sure your first lien position. Make sure there's no liens that supersede you. You want to be the last one in, but the first one out. And I think the best way to do that is always ensuring that you have that first lien recorded on the property.
All right, we're going to lighten the mood. I know you are out there in Queens. Lots of options here, but give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
So there is this restaurant on Woodhaven Boulevard. It's called A Taste of Samarkand. It is from the country that I'm formerly from, Uzbekistan, also Turkmenistan. I'm essentially from like kind of 2 different countries, but it's Samarkand is a city in Uzbekistan. So I would highly recommend next time you're in Queens, and if you ever visit, I would be upset if you don't call me, that we would go to Taste of Samarkand on Woodhaven Boulevard. You guys would love it.
I love it, man. I don't know if I've been to New York many times, but I don't know if I've ever actually been to Queens. I've been to Manhattan plenty of times and Brooklyn a few times.
You gotta come out to Boogie Down.
I've got to make
Queens.
sure I spend a trip and come out there, man. I appreciate that. Well,
Please
look,
do.
Ruben,
Please
you gave
do.
us a lot of great insights. I love, the last point there, first position, and what I take away from our conversation is how to mitigate risk when you are putting your capital in the hands of someone else. So we're talking primarily as a private lender, but I think even as an LP investor, you can use a lot of the principles, and it's understanding their experience and track record. It's understanding the way they look at the deal. It's understanding whether or not they are well positioned to have a takeout loan or refinance their loan. If the worst of the situation happens, when you're a private lender, is this an asset that you're comfortable taking over? If you have no clue how to deal with industrial, probably don't want to deal with that. Or if it's in a rough area, that may not be a property you want to lend on if they default and you've got to take this thing over. So these are really kind of simple ideas, but I think really important for people to think about when you are kind of creating your criteria of what kind of projects you want to invest in. So really important information there. And again, if anybody wants to learn more about what you've got going on, the debt fund that you're raising for right now, they can check out welendllc.com. Ruben, thank you again for coming on Multifamily Insights. It's been great talking to you. Hope you have a great day.
Same here. Thank you.